Welcome back to the Diver Guide channel. This video is all about how to do reverse dive, and I'm gonna go through about 6 different ways that a reverse dive can go wrong. By now you probably know that I make these videos because I wish I had these when I was younger, and I want you to be better off. So don't forget to subscribe, and let's get to it. I'm gonna go through these in order from what I think is the most basic mistake to the mistakes you need to think about once you've been doing this dive for a long time. This doesn't mean that the first mistakes are only for beginners. A lot of experts have this problem too. They just might not have it on their reverse dive. They might have it on their 1.5 or 2.5 or even reverse 3.5. So the first mistake is going through the knees. When you first learn this dive, it's very easy to jump out by letting your knees cut off the jump and going out. The issue with this is that you end up cutting off all your height and you're jumping out too far. Over time, you want to be able to jump higher, obviously, and bring it in closer to the board in a controlled way. The knees will always go out a little bit in front, but you don't want it to look like this, where they're just flying out super far. In the beginning, it's totally okay to do this, but as you get better and better, you'll notice that the best divers are using their hips to move themselves out and away from the board and extending all the way through their knees. This stops the knees from going forward, and it allows you to get the most jump out of the board. Rushing the jump and going through the knees is also usually paired with somebody who is walking down the board too fast and not transferring their forward momentum into a vertical jump. You'll notice a lot of people really try to jump out more than they need to. But over time, as you get better at your hurdle, you can use the board to your advantage and jump up a lot more than you're going out. The second thing I notice a lot of is that divers can be super archy on their takeoff. Now, I did just say that the best divers are using their hips to move themselves out, but what they're not doing is pulling with their shoulders too much. This will also happen in tandem with the knees going through too much. So you want to make sure on your takeoff, you're separating the arm circle from the shoulder movement. I go over this a lot in my how to do a hurdle video, but it's super important to allow your shoulders to relax as the arms swing up because it will allow you to not pull with your shoulders and keep yourself in a more neutral position as you take off the board. The proper way to do this is to swing through, let your hips extend slightly out as you finish the full extension into the full jump. That slight hip movement is what's going to take you up and away from the board safely, and the relaxed shoulders will stop you from pulling back. But there's one more layer to this. When you're doing your arm circle, you also want to make sure that your core is engaged because that will stop you from pulling back too much and arching. Those are just some different areas that you can think about to cue yourself to staying on top of your feet just a little bit more. Because it's super important to come off the board both hollow but also extended, which sounds like conflicting information because it is in a way. You want to have your core super engaged and hollow because that's the easiest place for your legs to pop up from, but you also don't want to be leaning forward. You want to have some extension through the hips. You're going to come through your hurdle with a nice hollow position on the hips, but as soon as you are ready to leave, the hips will slide out into a slightly extended position and it will allow the knees to pop up into the tuck a lot better. The third mistake that I see a lot of people make is that they don't allow their arms to get up on the takeoff. People will try really hard to muscle it and get their arms all the way up to their ears, but a lot of times they end up connecting with their shoulders like we were talking about before, or bending their arms too much to get through the arm circle. And that's what we call cutting off the arm circle. In my how to do a hurdle video, I do talk about the timing of the arm circle. So you can go watch that for a more detailed view on how to time the arm circle. But for reverse dives, you really want to make sure that when the board is at the bottom, you want to have your arms mostly all the way up. It's okay to have a little bit of a bend in your elbows, but you want to make sure that you're extended when you're leaving the board. Judges love seeing long, straight lines. And if you have bent knees and bent arms and you look archy, they're not going to like the way the takeoff looks. So you want to make sure that you come off nice and long and extended with straight arms, and you want your fingers all the way out too. The drill that I like to do for making my arms circle a little bit better is practicing the activation and relaxation. So what I mean by that is starting with your arms up at 12 o'clock above your head. You can add momentum, add energy into them as they're going from 12 o'clock But once they get to the bottom, you have to relax your shoulders and let the arms' momentum that you've already put into it, swing them back up. Using the momentum that the gravity and the force that you've already applied is the best way to stop your shoulders from connecting and pulling at the same time, and it helps you stay in balance on the takeoff. And the final note on the arms not getting up enough on the takeoff is if you do have bent elbows, make sure that they extend as you pop off the board. That'll give you a little bit extra throw basically into the dive, and that's going to be very helpful with setting the position on the takeoff. That way you can control the rotation speed for their tuck. In the beginning, you'll see a lot of people pull with their shoulders, like we talked about, which makes them archy on the takeoff, and they'll just bring their legs up. And this makes it harder to control because the flip speed is going to come from that takeoff when your arms are swinging. And if your shoulders are pulling stronger one time, you're going to over-rotate. So you have to be able to do what we call checking, which is as you come off the board, let your shoulders come forward slightly to meet the knees in the middle. That way you can place your kick in the same spot every time. And part of what helps you do that is your head position on the takeoff. As you come off the board, you want your eyes to be glancing down slightly, or at least out. That way your chin and head are in a neutral position. A lot of times in the beginning, you'll see people look up and their chin will tilt up. This is bad for a couple reasons. One, as you do harder dives, if your head is up on the takeoff, you won't be able to spot and you won't be able to get into a good tuck. Another reason that it isn't good is that it just doesn't look good. Take a look at somebody who has their head up too much on the takeoff versus somebody who's looking down, and as their legs come up, they look into their tuck. It's a much better looking dive because it's tighter, and it will also show that you have more control of the dive. As you come off the board, you can watch your legs come up to you, and since your head position is slightly down on the takeoff, you'll be able to see where you're going to kick out. That's super important because as you do this dive more and more, you'll be able to tell how fast your legs came up or how slow they came up, and where you have to place your feet on the kick in order to make this line up really well. But if you kick in the wrong spot, there's ways to fix that still. And that's the next mistake we usually see. People don't know how to kick out properly. And more specifically, they rush. In the beginning, you have to get out for the entry a lot faster than an expert who has a lot more time in the air. So that means that people usually rush and they just let go of their legs. They don't really see where they're kicking and they just throw their arms up and just try to get to the water. This makes it hard to control the entry. As you do this dive more and more and you're able to use the board more to get more height, it'll be super important to find your flat position. When you kick out, you want to be able to see your toes and keep your body as flat as possible with your head just tilting down to look at your toes. This is the best position to show off in this dive. A coach of mine once told me that the whole goal of back and reverse dive is to show off that position at the peak of the dive. So think about that for a second. If that's one of the most important points in the dive, you have to get off of the board, into the tuck, and out of the tuck all the way before you get to the peak, your maximum height. That's a lot to do in such a short time, but that's the goal and that's what you're chasing. Take videos and watch yourself so that you can see that when you kick out, you might actually be too hollow and you might not be flat, or you might be too archy and your hips might be extended a little bit too much, making it hard to see your toes. The more you practice that flat position, the better you'll get at it. Now, depending on where you kicked, you might have to make different adjustments for the entry, and this is where the fun happens. It's pretty much impossible to get the same dive every single time, but what you can do is make little adjustments if you kick short or if you kick too late or too high up. If you kick short, as you bring your arms through for the entry, you're gonna have to look back a little bit harder with your head, and you're gonna have to pull a little bit to get a little bit of arch in your back in order to get it all the way around. Make sure that you keep your core engaged when you do that so that your feet kind of follow along with you and you're not just dropping your feet. A lot of times when people arch their back, they end up dropping their feet and it makes it look even shorter. But if you pull a little bit archy for the entry while keeping your core engaged, your feet will actually come up slightly, making it appear like you're a little bit more vertical. If you kick too high, you're gonna have to knee save really hard. But you also need to make sure that you keep your body flat and you can't pull much for the entry. If you pull, it'll make you go archy, which will make your feet slap against the water. So you have to be able to keep that core engaged really tight and swim really hard while knee saving very hard as well. Okay, and the last thing I really want to go over is your alignment on the entries. You want to make sure that you're obviously grabbing your hands with your wrist kind of turned backwards a little bit and your arms slightly behind your ears. You almost want to feel like your head is being cradled a little bit by your arms, and your head has to be looking up slightly with your eyes looking over your eyebrows. The biggest mistake I see people make with entries is that they underestimate how hard they have to squeeze. I can't tell you enough how uncomfortable it feels in the beginning when you're first learning to do entries the right way. But if you just start squeezing harder now, you'll get used to it and it won't feel that crazy after you've practiced it for a couple weeks. Because the real goal is to lead with the hands slightly turned back, because underwater you really have to make a J. And if you're going in with your arms pointing in the wrong direction, it's not going to work out very well. So make sure that you're rotating the wrist back slightly and following the hands and head through the water with the rest of your body. All right, the last thing I want to do for you is talk about 2 examples that show some mistakes in action. This first diver does a really good job on their hurdle, lunging forward, but transferring most of that energy into vertical movement, not just forward. Slightly off balance coming down to the end of the board for the last jump, but they do a pretty good job getting their arms all the way up above their head. But pay attention here that they're kind of leaning forward. But this is going to come back and bite them in the end a little bit. Since they were leaning forward, their knees have to come in front a good amount to get into the tuck. They tap their knees, which, if you can, you should get your hands all the way down to your shins. The kickout is placed very well. And then this is where this person goes wrong. You can notice that they're a little bit cut off, but they're kicked out almost all the way flat. They're still a little bit too hollow on that kick out. So because he was leaning on the start and he kicked a little bit short, this dive is going to end up going in short as well. But he kind of messes it up because he looks back with his head really hard and he starts grabbing his hands before they get above his head. This is a tip that I didn't really go over in the first part of this video, but it's super important to try and grab your hands either by your face or once they're already above your head. If you grab them by your chest like he's doing here, it's going to connect the shoulders and kind of lock you up a little bit, which is a bad habit to get into. Because his head was looking back early and kind of hard, his arms can't get behind his ears, so he's not in the best alignment for the entry. You can see his head kind of poking out a little bit too much because he's looking with his whole face instead of just a slight tilt with the eyes looking over the eyebrows. I will say he did have to pull pretty hard because he did kick short and he was leaning on the start. So by throwing his head back that much on the entry, he was able to get it to go in pretty straight. So that's a good job there. Now you can see the difference with this diver who comes off the board a lot more flat, with their arms all the way extended, head neutral, not leaning forward or leaning back with any part of his body. His arms are all the way behind his ears on the takeoff, and then he gets into the tuck and out of the tuck for a flat kick out at the peak of his dive. Takes a moment to look at his toes, waits for the lineup, he starts falling, and then his arms quickly move all the way to his entry point with his arms slightly behind his ears and super tight. He's completely locked out and he just lines up that entry. But you can see how simple he makes this look because all of the movements are purposeful and there's no extra movements. And this is what we're trying to emulate. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video and share it with anybody that you think will need it. Good luck, and I'll talk to you later.